ba. All right, it looks like we are going live today with Chapter 37 of The Count of Monte Cristo, The Catacombs of Saint Sebastian. If you remember correctly, the boys have just finished off Carnival, and all of the candles that were 30,000 candles that were running around in Rome have now been extinguished. And the last line of Chapter 36 was, "The Carnival is over." So we're starting a new chapter now, and I can't really think of anything fun and or exciting or important to say. So we're going to go through this, probably do this for about an hour. So it's 8:19 right now on Tuesday, September 12th. And we'll probably record until about 9:15 or whatever. So I hope you are having a lovely Tuesday morning. I hope all of your fantasy football teams have won, and that you're just kind of kicking back and ASMRing Chapter 37. So here we go. Chapter 37. The Catacombs of Saint Sebastian. In his whole life, perhaps, Franz had never before experienced so sudden an impression, so rapid a transition from gaiety to sadness as in this moment. Ooh, it's kind of rough. We're warmed up, but we're not quite in the pocket. So let's go back to the pocket. Chapter 37. The Catacombs of Saint Sebastian. In his whole life, perhaps, Franz had never before experienced so sudden an impression, so rapid a transition from gaiety to sadness, as in this moment. It seemed as though Rome, under the magic breath of some demon of the night, had suddenly changed into a vast tomb. By a chance, which added yet more to the intensity of the darkness, the moon, which was on the wane, did not rise until 11 o'clock, and the streets which the young man traversed were plunged into the deepest obscurity. The distance was short, and at the end of 10 minutes his carriage, or rather the Count's carriage, stopped before the Hotel de Londres. That is a good opening. Sweet. All right. Get a breath, and here we go. Carriage stopped before the Hotel de Londres. Dinner was waiting, but as Albert had told him that he should not return so soon, Franz sat down without him. Signor Pastrini, who had been accustomed to see them dine together. Signor Pastrini. Down without him. Oh, a sad, lonely dinner. All right. Return so soon. Franz sat down without him. Signor Pastrini, who had been accustomed to see them dine together, inquired into the cause of his absence. But Franz merely replied that Albert had received on the previous evening. Okay. Cause of his absence. But Franz. There we go. But Franz and Albert. Together, inquired into the cause of his absence. But Franz merely replied that Albert had received on the previous evening an invitation. But Franz merely replied that Albert had received on the previous evening an invitation which he had accepted. The sudden extinction... Oh, wow, that's pretty good. Wasn't perfect, but it fits. Kinda. Here we go. Previous evening, an invitation which he had accepted. The sudden extinction of the candles, the darkness which had replaced the light, and the... nope. Everything was wrong with that. Which is fine. Sometimes everything just goes wrong. And you start over. You take a sip of water. Make sure you're evened out. And that you've got lots of oxygen in your lungs. And your lower body is all warmed up. And your back is straight. And you are ready for the sudden extinction of the mocoletti. Or in this case, the candles. Previous evening, an invitation which he had accepted. The sudden extinction of the candles, the darkness which had replaced the light, and the silence which had succeeded the turmoil, had left in Franz's mind a certain depression which was not free from uneasiness. He therefore dined very silently, in spite of the officious attention of his host, who presented himself 2 or 3 times to inquire if he wanted anything. Franz resolved to wait for Albert as late as possible. He ordered the carriage, therefore, for 11 o'clock, desiring Signor Pastrini to inform him the moment that Albert returned to the hotel. At 11 o'clock, Albert had not come back. Franz dressed himself and went out, telling his host that he was going to pass the night at the Duke of Bracciano's. Woo! Duke of Bracciano's. Good. That needed to be a new paragraph anyway. Pass the night at the Duke of Bracciano's. The house of the Duke of Bracciano is one of the most delightful in Rome. The Duchess, one of the last heiresses of the Colonnas, does its honor with the most consummate grace, and thus their parties have a European celebrity. Franz and Albert had brought to Rome letters of introduction to them, and their first question on his arrival was to inquire the whereabouts of his traveling. A European celebrity. I don't know what that means, but, it must have meant something in the early 1800s. Have a European celebrity. Franz and Albert had brought to Rome letters of introduction to them, and their first question on his arrival. Have a European celebrity. Franz and Albert had brought to Rome letters of introduction to them, and their first question on his arrival was to inquire the whereabouts of his traveling companion. Franz replied that he had left him at the moment they were about to extinguish the candles, and that he had lost sight of him in the Via Macello. "Then he has not returned," said the Duke. "I waited for him until this hour," replied Franz. "And do you know whither he went?" "No, not precisely. However, I think it was something very like a rendezvous." "The devil," said the Duke. "This is a bad day, or rather a bad night to be out late. Is it not, Countess?" These words were addressed to the Countess G., who had just arrived, and was leaning on the arm of Signor Torlonia. Oh, Torlonia. And was leaning on the arm of Sir Torlonia. Signor Torlonia. Signor T., the Duke's brother. "Is it not, Countess?" Signor Torlonia. Signor Torlonia. On the arm of Signor Torlonia. "Is it not, Countess?" These words were addressed to the Countess G., who had just arrived, and was leaning on the arm of Signor Torlonia, the Duke's brother. "I think, on the contrary, it is a charming night," replied the Countess. "And those who are here will complain of but one thing, of its too rapid flight." "I am not speaking," said the Duke with a smile, "of the persons who are here. The men run no other danger than that of falling in love with you, and the women of falling ill of jealousy at seeing you so lovely. I meant persons who are out in the streets of Rome." "Oh," asked the Countess, "who is out in the streets of Rome at this hour, unless it to be... Oh. Persons who are out in the streets of Rome. "Oh," asked the Countess, "who is out in the streets of Rome at this hour, unless it be to go to a ball, Persons who are out in the streets of Rome. "Oh," asked the Countess, "who is out in the streets of Rome at this hour, unless it be to go to a ball?" "Our friend, Albert de Morcerf, Countess, whom I left in..." Oh, that's Franz speaking. Not the Count, that's Franz. Hi-ho, Kermit the Franz here. "Unless it be to go to a ball." "Our friend, Albert de Morcerf, Countess, whom I left in pursuit of his unknown about 7 o'clock this evening," said Franz, "and whom I have not seen since." "And you don't know where he is?" "Not at all." "Is he armed?" He is in masquerade. You should not have allowed him to go, said the Duke to Franz. You who know Rome better than him. Let's just start that from top. From scratch. He is in masquerade. You should not have allowed him to go, said the Duke to Franz. You know Rome better than he does. Well, you might as well have tried to stop number 3 of the racers who gained the prize in the race today, replied Franz. And then, moreover, what could happen to him? And then, moreover, what could happen to him? What could happen to him? Who can tell? The night is gloomy and the Tiber is very near the Via Macello. Franz felt a shudder run through his veins at observing that the feeling of the Duke and the Countess was so much more in unison with his own personal disquietude. I informed them at the hotel that I had the honor of passing the night here, Duke, said Franz, and desired them to come and inform me of his return. Replied the Duke. Here I think is one of my servants who is seeking you. Whoops. All right. Make sure that's off. Said the Duke. Replied the Duke. Actually, how much of that did I get? Here I think is one of my servants who is seeking you. Cool. Here I think is one of my servants in seeking you. Ba-ba-da. Oh, God. So much in unison with his own personal disquietude. Here I think is one of my servants who is seeking you. The Duke was not mistaken. When he saw Franz, the servant came up to him. Your Excellency, he said, the master of the Hotel de Londres has sent to let you know that a man is waiting for you with a letter from the Count of Morcerf. A letter from the Count, exclaimed Viscount, not Count, Viscount. Excellency, he said. Your Excellency, he said. The master of the Hotel de la... He's got to be young. Yeah, but he's going to clash into Franz, so we need to fix that. Your Excellency. Let's make him a little lighter. Saw Franz, the servant came up to him. Your Excellency, he said. The master of the Hotel de Londres has sent to let you know that a man is waiting for you with a letter from the Viscount de Morcerf. A letter from the Viscount? Exclaimed Franz. Yes. And who is the man? I do not know. Why did he not bring it here to me? The messenger did not say. And where is the messenger? He went away directly. He went directly. Too much counterpoint. And where is the messenger? He went away just as he saw me enter the ballroom to find you. Oh. Where is the messenger? He went away just... see, not quite long enough. There we go. Boop-a-doop. Countess, here we go. He went away just as he saw me enter the ballroom to find you. Oh, said the Countess to Franz. Go with all speed. Poor young man. Perhaps some accident has happened to him. I will hasten, replied Franz. Shall we see you again to give us any information? Inquired the Countess. Yes, if it is not any serious affair. Otherwise, I cannot answer as to what I may do myself. Be prudent in any event, said the Countess. Oh, pray, be assured of that. Franz took his hat and went away in haste. He had sent away his carriage with orders for it to fetch him at 2 o'clock. Fortunately, the Palazzo Bracciano. At 2 o'clock. It's the Italian words I'm good with. It's going to be the French words that I'm going to have a hard time with. That's coming up in part 3. Sent away his carriage with orders for it to fetch him at 2 o'clock. Fortunately, the Palazzo Bracciano, which is on one side of the Corso and on the other in the Square of the Holy Apostles, is hardly 10 minutes' walk from the Hotel de Londres. As he came near the hotel, Franz saw a man in the middle of the street. He had no doubt that it was the messenger from Albert. The man was wrapped up in a large cloak. He went up to him, but to his extreme astonishment, Okay. The man was wrapped up in a large cloak. He went up to him, but to his extreme astonishment, the stranger first addressed him. What wants your excellency? What wants your excellency of me? Extreme astonishment. The stranger first addressed him. What wants your excellency of me? Inquired the man, retreating a step or two as if to keep on his guard. Are you not the person who brought me a letter? Inquired Franz. From the Viscount of Morcerf. Your excellency lodges at Pistrini's hotel. I do. Your excellency is the traveling companion of the Viscount. I am. Your excellency's name is the Baron Franz d'Epnay. Then it is to your excellency that lists... The Baron Franz d'Epnay. Then it is to your excellency that this letter is addressed. Is there any answer? Inquired Franz, taking the letter from him. Yes, your friend at least hopes so. Come upstairs with me and I'll give it to you. I prefer waiting here, said the messenger with a smile. And why? Your excellency will know when you have read the letter. Shall I find you here, then? Certainly. Franz entered the hotel. On the staircase he met Signor Pastrini. Well, said the landlord. Well, what? Responded Franz. You have seen the man who desired to speak with you and your friend, he asked of Franz. With you from your friend. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to keep it. Franz. Well, what? Responded Franz. You have seen the man who desired to speak with you from your friend, he asked of Franz. Yes, I have seen him, he replied, and he has handed this letter to me. Light the candles in my apartment, if you please. The innkeeper gave orders to his servant to go before Franz with a light. The young man had found... Before Franz with a light. The young man... gave orders to his servant to go before Franz with a light. The young man had found Signor Pastrini looking very much alarmed, and this had only made him the more anxious to read Albert's letter, and so he went instantly towards the waxlight and unfolded it. It was written and signed by Albert. Franz read it twice before he could comprehend what it contained. It was thus worded. My dear fellow, the moment you have received this, have the kindness to take the letter of credit from my pocketbook, which you will find in the square drawer of the secretary. Add your own to it, if it be not a... Drawer of the secretary. My dear fellow. Don't like secretary there. Find of the bureau. Bureau, let's just say bureau. Bureau makes sense. More of the desk. Desk is so much better. There we go. Again, what it contained. It was thus worded. My dear fellow, the moment you have received this, have the kindness to take the letter of credit from my pocketbook, which you will find in the square drawer of the desk. Add it to your own if it not be sufficient. Run to Torlonia, draw from him instantly 4,000 piastres, and give them to the bearer. It is urgent that I should have this money without delay. I do not say more, relying on you as may rely on me. Your friend, Albert de Morcerf. P.S. I now believe in Italian bandits. Below these lines were written in a strange hand the following in Italian. If by 6 in the morning the 4,000 piastres are not in my hands, by 7 o'clock the Count Albert will have ceased to live. Luigi Vampa. This second signature explained everything to Franz, who now understood the objection of the messenger to coming up to Slow down, you move too fast. You gotta make the morning last, just kicking down cobblestones, looking for fun and feeling groovy. Okay, slow down. Will have ceased to live. Luigi Vampa. Oops. Try not to hit the mic with your hands. Step number 1. Do not hit the mic. Will have ceased to live. Luigi Vampa. This second signature explained everything to Franz, who now understood the objection of the messenger to coming up into the apartment. The street was safer for him. Albert then had fallen into the hands of the famous bandit chief, in whose existence he had just, doesn't work out like that sometimes. Into the apartment. The street was safer for him. Albert then had fallen into the hands of the famous bandit chief, in whose existence he had for so long a time refused to believe. There was no time to lose. He hastened to open the drawer. For so long a time refused to believe. There was no time to lose. He hastened to open the desk and found the pocketbook in the drawer, and in it the letter of credit. There were in all 6,000 piastres, but of these 6,000, Albert had already expended 3,000. As to Franz, he had no letter of credit. 3,000. Had already expended 3,000. As to Franz, he had no letter of credit, as he lived at Florence, and had only come to Rome to pass 7 or 8 days. He had brought but 100 louis, and of these he had not more than 50 left. Thus, 700 or 800 piastres were wanting to them both to make up the sum that Albert required. True, he might in such a case rely on the kindness of Signor Torlonia. He was therefore about to return the... Is there a big breath there? He was therefore... We're going to leave that breath. Actually, no. Let's see if we're up there. Yeah, let's go required. Sometimes we leave the breaths in, sometimes we cut them out. So it's just part of the day. So we're wanting to them both to make up the sum that Albert required. True, he might in such a case rely on the kindness of Signor Torlonia. He was therefore about to return to the Palazzo Bracciano without loss of time, when suddenly a luminous idea crossed his mind. He remembered the Count of Monte Cristo. Franz was about to ring for Signor Pastrini when the worthy presented himself. "My dear sir," he said hastily. Oh, he said hastily. It's all right. And the worthy presented himself. "My dear sir," he said hastily, "do you know if the Count is within?" "Yes, Your Excellency. He has this moment returned." "Is he in bed?" "I should say no." "Then ring at his door, if you please, and request him to be so kind as to give me an audience." Signor Pastrini did as he was desired, and returning 5 minutes later, said, "The Count awaits Your Excellency." "The Count awaits Your Excellency." Sugar pie. Did as he was desired, and returning 5 minutes later, said, The Count to which, Your Excellency. Franz went along the corridor, and a servant introduced him to the Count. He was in a small room which Franz had not yet seen, and which was surrounded with divans. The Count came towards him. "Well, what good wind blows you hither at this hour?" he said. "Have you come to sup with me? It would be very kind of you." "No, I have come to speak of you of a very serious matter." "A serious matter," said the Count, looking at Franz with the earnestness usual to him. "And what may it be?" "Are we alone?" "Yes," replied the Count, going to the door and returning. Franz gave him Albert's letter. "Read that," he said. The Count read it. Well, well," he said. "Do you see the postscript?" I did indeed. Luigi Vampa. "What think you of that?" inquired Franz. "Have you the money he demands?" "Yes, all but 800 piastres." The Count went to his desk, opened it, and pulling out a drawer filled with gold, said to Franz, "I hope you will not offend me by applying to anyone but myself." "You see, on the contrary, I come to you first and instantly," replied Franz. "And I thank you. Have what you will." He made a sign to Franz to take what he pleased. "Is it absolutely necessary, then, to send the money to Luigi Vampa?" asked the young man, looking fixedly in his turn at the Count. "Judge for yourself." I have found the Count's voice. He is there. He is just me. That's terrible. I did not spend 14 years in prison. However, sometimes feels like I did. Feels like I did. We just call it a summer stock. Let me go. Fixedly in his turn at the Count. "Judge for yourself," he replied. "The postscript is explicit." "I think that if you would take the trouble of reflecting, you could find a way of simplifying the negotiation," said Franz. "How so?" returned the Count with surprise. "If we were to go together to Luigi Vampa, I'm sure he would not refuse you Albert's freedom." "What influence can I possibly have over a bandit?" "Have you not just rendered him a service that can never be forgotten?" "What is that?" "Have you not saved Peppino's life?" "Well, well," said the Count. "Who told you that?" "No matter, I know it." The Count knit his brows and remained silent an instant. "And if I went to seek Vampa, would you accompany me?" "If my society would not be disagreeable." "Be it so. It is a lovely night, and a walk without Rome will do us both good." "And a walk without Rome will do us both good?" No, that's not. "And a walk around Rome will do us both good." It is a lovely night. Be it so. It is a lovely night. "And a walk around Rome will do us both good." "Shall I take my arms?" "For what purpose?" "Any money?" "It is useless. Where is the man who brought the letter?" "In the street." "He awaits the answer?" "Yes." "I must learn where we are going. I will summon him hither." "It is useless. He will not come up." "To your apartments, perhaps. But he will not make any difficulty at entering mine." The Count went to the window of the apartment that looked onto the street and whistled in a peculiar manner. The man in the mantle quitted the wall and advanced into the middle of the street. "Salite. Salite." And in the mantle quitted the wall and advanced into the middle of the street. "Salite," said the Count, in the same tone in which he would have given an order to his servant. The messenger obeyed without the least hesitation, but rather with alacrity, and, mounting the steps at a bound, entered the hotel. 5 seconds afterwards he was at the door of the room. "Ah, it is you, Peppino," said the Count. But Peppino, instead of answering, threw himself on his knees, seized the Count's hand, and covered it with kisses. "Ah," said the Count, "you have then not forgotten that I saved your life. That is strange, for it is a week ago." "No, Excellency, and never shall I forget it," returned Peppino with an accent of profound gratitude. "Never. That is a long time. But it is something that you believe so. Rise and answer." Peppino glanced anxiously at Franz. "Oh, you may speak before His Excellency," he said. "He is one of my friends." "You allow me to give you this title," continued the Count in French. "It is necessary to excite this man's confidence." "You can speak before me," said Franz. "I am a friend of the Count's." "Good," returned Peppino. "I am ready to answer any questions your Excellency may address to me." "How did the Viscount Albert fall into Luigi's hands?" "Excellency, the Frenchman's carriage passed several times the one in which was Teresa." "The chief's mistress?" "Yes. The Frenchman threw her a bouquet. Teresa returned it. All this with the consent of the chief who was in the carriage." "What?" cried Franz. "Was Luigi Vampa in the carriage with the Roman peasants?" "Peasants? Was Luigi Vampa in the carriage with the Roman peasants?" cried Franz. All right, here we go. "What?" cried Franz. "Was Luigi Vampa in the carriage with the Roman peasants?" "It was he who drove, disguised as the coachman," replied Peppino. "Well," said the Count. "Well, then the Frenchman took off his mask. Teresa and with the chief's consent, and the Frenchman took off his mask." We're a little dry. Here we go. "Well," said the Count. "Well, then the Frenchman took off his mask. Teresa, with the chief's consent, did the same. The Frenchman asked for a rendezvous. Teresa gave him one, only instead of Teresa, it was Beppo who was on the steps of the church of San Giacomo." "What?" exclaimed Franz. "The peasant girl who snatched his candle from him?" "Was a lad of 15, replied Peppino. "But it was no disgrace to your friend to have been deceived. Beppo has taken in plenty of others." "And Beppo led him outside the walls," said the Count. "Exactly so. A carriage was waiting at the end of the Via Macello. Beppo got in, inviting the Frenchman to follow him, and he did not wait to be asked twice. He gallantly offered the right-hand seat to Beppo and sat by him. Beppo told him he was going to take him to a villa a league from Rome. The Frenchman assured him he would follow him to the end of the world. The coachman went up the Via di Ripetta and the Porta San Paolo, and when they were 200 yards outside, as the Frenchman became somewhat too forward, Beppo put a brace of pistols to his head. The coachman pulled up and did the same. At the same time, 4 of the band, who were concealed on the banks of the Almo, surrounded the carriage. The Frenchman made some resistance and nearly strangled Beppo, but he could not resist 5 armed men, and was forced to yield. They made him get out, walk along the banks of the river, and then brought him to Teresa and Luigi, who were waiting for him in the catacombs of St. Sebastian." "Well," said the Count, turning towards Franz, "it seems to me this is a very likely story. What do you say to it?" "Why, that I should think it very amusing," replied Franz, "if it had happened to anyone but poor Albert." "Oh, yeah. What do they call me? They call me One Take Josh." Actually, that's not what they call me. They just call me Josh. But you can call me One Take Josh if you like. Although I've taken, 47 takes at this point? But this is fine. Anyone but poor Albert. Here we go. Cried Franz. "If it had happened to anyone but poor Albert." "And, in truth, if you had not found me here," said the Count, "it might have proved a gallant adventure which..." See, now he's getting his swagger back. I do not want the Count to have swagger. I want him to have... What do I want him to have? I want him to have... calm anger. Okay, here we go.
Replied Franz. If it had happened to anyone but poor Albert.
And in truth, if you had not found me here, said the Count, it might have proved a gallant adventure which would have cost your friend dear. But now, be assured, his alarm will be the only serious consequence. And shall we go find him? Inquired Franz. Oh, decidedly, sir. He is in a very picturesque place.
Decidedly, sir. He is in a very picturesque...
Oh, decidedly, sir. Oh, decidedly, sir.
And shall we go find him? Inquired Franz.
Oh, decidedly, sir. He is in a very picturesque place. Do you know the catacombs of St. Sebastian? I was never in them, but I have often resolved to visit them. Well, here's an opportunity made to your hand. It would be difficult to contrive a better. Have you a carriage? No. That is of no consequence. I always have one ready, day and night. Always ready? Yes. I am a very capricious being, and I should tell you that sometimes when I rise, or after my dinner, or in the middle of the night, I resolve on starting for some particular point, and away I go. The Count rang, and a footman appeared. Order out the carriage, he said, and remove the pistols which are in the holsters. You need not awaken the coachman. Ali will drive. In a very short time, desk noise. Gotta stop the desk noise. Yeah. Okay, boop-a-choo. 8:55. Working good.
Coachman, Ali will drive.
In a very short time, the noise of wheels was heard, and the carriage stopped at the door. The Count took out his watch. 12:30, he said. We might start at 5 o'clock and be in time, but the delay may cause your friend to pass an uneasy night, and therefore we had better go with all speed to extricate him from the hands of the infidels. Are you still resolved to accompany? Are you still resolved to accompany me?
To extricate him from the hands of the infidels.
Are you still resolved to accompany me? More determined than ever. Well then, come along. Franz and the Count went downstairs, accompanied by Peppino. At the door they found the carriage. Ali was on the box, in whom Franz recognized the dumb slaves. Ali was on the box.
Where they found the carriage.
Got a little snappy, snap. Here we go. Ali was on the carriage.
At the door they found the carriage.
Peppino placed himself beside Ali, and they set off at a rapid pace. Ali had received his instructions and went down the Corso, crossed the Campo... Wait a second, that's not right. I'm in the wrong carriage. I skipped an entire sentence.
At the door they found the carriage.
Ali was on the box, in whom Franz recognized as the mute slave of the grotto of Monte Cristo. Franz and the Count got into the carriage. Peppino placed himself beside Ali, and they set off at a rapid pace. Ali had received his instructions and went down the Corso, crossed the Campo Vaccino, went up the Strada San Gregorio, and reached the gates of San Sebastian. Then the porter raised some difficulties, but the Count of Monte Cristo produced a permit from the governor of Rome. A permit, not a permit. Okay.
Reached the gates of San Sebastian.
Then the porter raised some difficulties, but the Count of Monte Cristo produced a permit from the governor of Rome, allowing him to leave or enter the city at any hour of the day or night. The portcullis was therefore raised. The porter had a louis for his trouble, and they went on their way. The road which the carriage now traversed was the ancient Appian Way and bordered the tombs. From time to time, by the light of the moon which began to rise, Franz imagined that he saw something like a sentinel appear at various points among the ruins, and suddenly retreat into the darkness on a signal from Peppino.
Among the ruins, and suddenly, a sentinel appeared at various points among the ruins.
And suddenly retreat into the darkness on a signal from Peppino. A short time before they reached the baths of Caracalla, the carriage stopped. Peppino opened the door, and the Count and Franz alighted. In 10 minutes. In 10 minutes. Let's back that up. Remember, we're cool, hostile rage. In 10 minutes. We shall be there in 10 minutes. We shall be there in 10 minutes.
Opened the door, and the Count and Franz alighted.
In 10 minutes, said the Count to his companion. In 10 minutes, said the Count to his companion. We shall be there. He then took Peppino aside, gave him an order in a low voice, and Peppino went away, taking with him a torch brought with them in the carriage. 5 minutes elapsed, during which Franz saw the shepherd going along a narrow path that led over the irregular and broken surface of the campagna.
He then took Peppino. In 10 minutes, said the Count to his companion. We shall be there.
10 minutes. Starting to lose focus.
The torch brought with them in the carriage.
Starting to run out of water, too. What time are we at? Okay, we got about 15 more minutes, then we'll take a break. And then we shall call it a day for today's uplink. We've got other things to do as well. It is Tuesday.
Away, taking with him a torch brought with them in the carriage.
5 minutes elapsed, during which Franz saw the shepherd going along a narrow path that led over the irregular and broken surface of the campagna. And finally, he disappeared in the midst of the tall red herbage, which seemed like the bristling mane of an enormous lion. Now, said the Count, let us follow him. Franz and the Count, in their turn, then advanced along the same path, which, at the distance of 100 paces, led them over a declivity to the bottom of a small valley. They then perceived 2 men conversing in the obscurity. Ought we to go on? Asked Franz of the Count. Or should we pause? Let us go on. Peppino will have warned the sentry of our coming. One of the 2 men was Peppino, and the other a bandit on the lookout. Franz and the Count advanced, and the bandit saluted him. Your Excellency, said Peppino, addressing the Count, if you will follow me, the opening of the catacombs is close at hand. Go on, then, replied the Count. Go on, then. Go on, then.
Follow me. The opening of the catacombs is close at hand.
Go on, then, replied the Count. They came to an opening behind a clump of bushes, and in the midst of a pile of rocks, by which a man could scarcely pass, Peppino glided first into this crevice. After they got along... Let's start again from that. It's almost perfect, but it just felt like I'm off my rhythm. It's all right.
Go on, then, replied the Count.
They came to an opening behind a clump of bushes, and in the midst... They came to an opening behind a clump of bushes, and in the midst of a pile of rocks by which a man could scarcely pass. Peppino glided first into this crevice. After they got along a few paces, the passage widened. Peppino passed, lighted his torch, and turned to see if they came after him. The Count first reached an open space, and Franz closely... Darn. It's okay.
Closely, if they came after him.
Came after him.
And turned to see if they came after him.
The Count first reached an open space, and Franz followed him closely. The passageway sloped in a gentle descent, enlarging as they proceeded. Still, Franz and the Count were compelled to advance in a stooping posture, and were scarcely able to proceed abreast of one another. They went on 150 paces in this way, and were stopped by, "Who comes there?" At the same time, they saw the reflection of a torch on a carbine barrel. "A friend," responded Peppino. How much of this chapter do we got left? We got a bit, okay. So we're getting close to the end times. And
At the same time, they saw the reflection of a torch on a carbine barrel.
Cool. The carbine barrel.
Of a torch on a carbine barrel.
"Friend," responded Peppino, and, advancing alone towards the sentry, he said a few words to him in a low tone, and then he, like the first, saluted the nocturnal visitors, making a sign that they might proceed. Behind the sentinel was a staircase with 20 steps. Franz and the Count descended these, and found themselves in a mortuary chamber. 5 corridors diverged like the rays of a star, and the walls dug into niches, which were arranged.
The star in the mortuary chamber. The mortuary chamber.
If I can get rid of that snap before I have to deal with it later.
The mortuary chamber.
Perfect. What we're doing is making a little edits while we are operating so that we don't have to deal with those edits later on. And there was a little bit of a mouth noise at the end of chamber. Okay, here we go.
Count descended these and found themselves in a mortuary chamber.
5 corridors diverged like the rays of a star, and the walls dug into niches, which were arranged one above the other in the shape of coffins, showed that they were at least boop snoot. Here we go.
Count descended these and found themselves in a mortuary chamber.
5 corridors diverged like the rays of a star, and the walls, dug into niches, were arranged one above the other in the shape of coffins. This showed that they were at last in the catacombs. Down one of the corridors, whose extent it was impossible to determine, rays of light were visible. The Count laid his hand on Franz's shoulder. "Would you like to see a camp of bandits in repose?" He inquired. Would you like to see a grown man naked? All right, here we go.
Laid his hand on Franz's shoulder.
"Would you like to see a camp of bandits in repose?" he inquired. "Exceedingly," replied Franz. "Come with me, then." Peppino put out the torch. Peppino obeyed, and Franz and the Count were in utter darkness, except that 50 paces in advance of them, a reddish glare, more evident since
Glare. More paces in advance of them, a reddish glare.
more evident since Peppino had put out his torch, was visible. Oh, you suck. Except that in 50 paces, his torch was visible. Okay, so we need to go back to accept.
Darkness. Except. Franz and the Count were in utter darkness.
Except that 50 paces in advance of them, a reddish glare, more evident since Peppino had put out his torch, was visible along the wall. They advanced silently, the Count guiding Franz as if he had the singular faculty, not facility. Faculty. So much faculty, very little facility. Okay, here we go.
As Peppino had put out his torch, was visible along the wall.
They advanced silently, the Count guiding Franz as if he had the singular faculty of seeing in the dark. Franz himself, however, saw his way more plainly in proportion as he went on towards the light, which served in some manner as a guide. 3 arcades were before them, and the middle one was used as a door. These arcades opened on one side into the corridor where the Count and Franz were, and on the other into a large square chamber, entirely surrounded by niches similar to those of which we have spoken. In the midst of this chamber were 4 stones, which had formerly served as an altar. In the midst of this chamber were 4 stones, which had formerly served as an altar. An alternative. All right. Okay, we're going to get all the way to that spot, and then we should be good. In the midst of the chamber were 4 stones. 909. Excellent.
Similar to those of which we have spoken.
In the midst of this chamber were 4 stones, which had formerly served as an altar, as was evident from the cross which still surmounted them. God damn it. Gosh darn it is what I meant to say. Gosh darn it.
Similar to those of which we have spoken.
In the midst of this chamber were 4 stones, which had formerly served as an altar, as was evident from the cross which still surmounted them. A lamp, placed at the base of a pillar, lighted up, with its pale and flickering flame, the singular scene which presented itself to the eyes of the 2 visitors, concealed in the shadow. A man was seated with his elbow leaning on the column, and was reading with his back turned to the arcades, through the openings of which the newcomers, the cucumbers, not the newcomers, not the cucumbers. Oops, don't hit the mic.
Eyes of the 2 visitors concealed in the shadow.
A man was seated with his elbow leaning on the column, and was reading with his back turned to the arcades through which the openings of which the newcomers contemplated him. Oh, there's too many witches in there. There's too many witches in the witch's brew. Yikes. Yeah, we're starting to get a little punchy. It's time for a break. Okay. He did not hear the noise of his footsteps. Here we go.
Eyes of the 2 visitors concealed in the shadow.
A man was seated with his elbow leaning on the column, and was reading with his back turned to the arcades, through the openings of which the newcomers contemplated him. This was the chief of the band, Luigi Vampa. Around him, and in groups according to their fancy, lying in their mantles, or with their backs against a sort of stone bench. Do we want to end at Luigi Vampa?
Luigi Vampa.
Yeah, I think that is good for today, but we do need to remind ourselves that's where we broke. All right, that has been about, let's see, just a little shy of 50 minutes, and we cut in about 26 altogether, and that is a good haul for this morning. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday. We will get back to introducing Luigi Vampa in the catacombs of St. Sebastian tomorrow morning around 8:15, 8:30. And I hope you had a good time, and please subscribe or do whatever it is that you do when you do things. And have a